Alameda County DA Pamela Price's work laptop stolen from SUV in Oakland, the sources say. That's right. The DA in the Bay, one of the DAs in the Bay Area, who is apparently soft on crime, is now the victim of soft on crime policies. This isn't the first one. I had a story last week about the New Orleans Soros-backed DA who was carjacked, I think, with his mom.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not good.
It needs to happen.
Yes, but they want it to happen.
Yeah. Well, then good that it happens to them because they need to learn. They need to. I have no mercy on these people.
I see what you're saying, right? And we laugh because of Schadenfreude, but the problem is the Alameda County DA is probably laughing with you.
Do you think? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. They intentionally do this, and when it happens to them, they go, it worked. We did it. We won. We have destroyed the city. Yay. And then what happens is conservatives are like, haha, great, we agree. And they're like, these idiots are agreeing with us. These people are destroying our once great cities, and conservatives are laughing along with them.
What are we going to do about them, though? That's the thing.
Vote them out.
Nothing unless the populations decide that they want to vote these people out. This is going to continue to happen. And it's been going on for the better part of 10 years. It didn't just happen overnight. These DAs and stuff, they've won multiple elections. They've got their administrations well entrenched into the local areas. And until the population decides I'm tired of it, that it's not going to change. And not for nothing, but your average person that has kids and a job that doesn't pay attention to politics all the time, they don't really pay much attention. They don't know what's going on. They're not aware. And when you tell them, I've had the experience myself. I'll tell my friends that are left-leaning. I was just in California a couple of weeks ago. I'll tell my friends that are left-leaning about things, and they just don't believe it. They're astounded. They have no idea. And I don't blame them because, look, you got a family. That's the most important thing in your life. You got kids. That's the most important thing in your life. I get it. But you do have to be aware of what is going on in your own municipality.
We've got a guy in Philly named Larry Krasner. He's a disaster. Nobody even knows his name. They don't even know his name. This guy has turned the city into a complete disaster. Not that we were ever great. It's been a disaster since I've been born. But right now, what we have, you can't even go downtown anymore. And what was this woman doing with a laptop in her car visible, by the way? And how stupid. This is how stupid
you don't know
these people are. Well, who knows?
It probably was not visible.
Who knows?
Because they smash out. So what people are doing now in the Bay Area is they're leaving the back gates of their vans and SUVs open, and they're leaving the doors open.
Yeah,
why?
I heard,
so that the criminals won't smash out the windows to come. And so if the doors so they'll walk up to any car with nothing in it, and they'll smash the windows out and then check the trunk and then leave.
That's why we got the Second Amendment.
And we're seeing this taking place throughout the United States in all of these Democratic run down districts. People, when you keep voting for the same people and you are expecting a different outcome, it's not going to happen.
That's the internet's definition of insanity. But like Phil mentioned, these people don't know. And, I can say proudly that the past few holiday cycles, I've encountered many people who engage exactly as Phil said. You'll say something like, yes, X happened. And they'll go, that's not true. There's no way. And then this is 2 years ago. And then last year, they're like, I read that. And then I was reading this thing, too. And it's like people are starting to realize. Ian was mentioning this a couple of weeks ago, that whenever a crazy story comes out, he immediately has to call his mom to make sure he gets the information to her before the mainstream media can put some cover up over it.
Yeah.
Ian is his own breaking news to his mom.
Yeah. Mom, you're going to hear the story. Here's the link. It's from this article. They're going to come out and they're going to say something. And then he's like, if I don't tell her, she'll believe some crazy nonsense later on.
Yeah,
my mother watches that stuff, and the things that she believes, she's probably watching this, but she's never watched the podcast before. I know that much. But, the things that you believe, if you only get your news from the mainstream media, it's unbelievably sad how misinformed these people are. And willingly, it's all out there. We know it. We found out.
To some degree, to some extent, I agree with you. I harp on Barack Obama in the 2012, I think it was, NDAA that repealed the Smith-Mundt, or had the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. Essentially, what it said is that since the 40s, the federal government wasn't allowed to propagandize the American people. Essentially, they couldn't produce materials for dissemination inside the United States. And in 2000, I think it was 12, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was part of the NDAA that Barack Obama signed. And it happened just at the time that the smartphone
was
coming into it was getting into everyone's pocket, and social media with the like button was essentially the most powerful mind control tool ever invented. Yeah. And so you've got people that are in the tech industry and stuff like that are producing these applications that draw people in, and people love to use them. Yeah. And the federal government is given free rein to feed these tech companies and whatever information they want, and the media and the tech companies do it willingly. There was no need for payoff or anything, because what the federal government offered was access. If you do these things, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And that was the beginning of the tech companies, in my opinion, becoming a part of the military-industrial complex.
And you never hear the Republicans who are supposed to be on our side about the propaganda stuff. You never hear them talk about that act, and you never will. There's one candidate in Texas, Caroline Kane. Only person I've ever heard bring it up. I'm
pretty sure that there's a guy running that will talk about it. The AK guy, Brennan, I forget Brennan's last name, but he'll talk about it. He'd mentioned it. But it's something that people need to know. Yeah. The fact that the federal government is not only allowed to disseminate information into the population, but is doing it in conjunction with tech companies that have the ability to literally control people's opinions, right? People will behave in remarkably different ways if they get likes or they get, approval from their friends. And that's exactly what the like button does. It gives people that little dopamine hit, and those kind of small dopamine hits that are not something that is a big deal. It's a little bit all the time. It flies under the radar, and it has had a massive, massive impact on the population. People talk about how in 2012, 13, everything seems so much crazier now than before that. And you hear that people my age talking about that all the time, and I truly believe that it is because prior to 2012, 2011, you didn't have the kind of consistent propagandizing from the federal government.
I don't think so. I think
you said it yourself with the
algorithms.
Algorithms.
Yeah, but that's private sector. That was before the repealing of this act, and the U.S. government has been propagandizing for a long time. A lot of the stuff that we see leaked from WikiLeaks, for instance, and from other hacker groups around that time show they were doing this well before. And I think what they ultimately did with this was more overt. It was the Simpsons-esque superliminal, where they just launch these American-backed foreign media companies. I don't think that repealing this propaganda act is what made everything get crazy. I think it's social media and the internet, and that's why the 90s was the last decade, right? Mm-hmm. Like every decade is easily discernible, except for the 2000s and beyond. It's a big mess.
Yeah,
and it's because the internet fractured global culture, American culture, and has continued to. I think it's going to be rebuilding itself, though. I think it shatters into all these different pockets where people start listening to very specific things, specific people, and you no longer have. I said this 10 years ago. I was at a conference. I said fame is done because of the internet, and I was like, you're going to have famous people, but it's not going to be like actually, Phil and I were talking about this, like Metallica, the biggest band ever.
Yeah,
but it's because there was a period where culture was more unified.
Yes.
And there were fewer channels to get access to music, Metallica being the best, got everybody. But now there's probably a band, very, very, very good, very great music, but they have a much harder time reaching as many people because no longer straight top-down broadcast tower, it's more even out.
Everything is niche now.
But I'm kind of thinking that things will start to recoalesce again. They'll start to come back together for a combination of reasons. One, people are like power naturally does this. And so we're seeing people want to be like each other. So there's trends and they want to follow these trends. But more importantly, the powers that be are desperately trying to cobble back together the broadcast tower so they can have singular control over what people think.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot, some like the elderly population, they stay home all day. They watch the news channels all day and they believe everything that's being shown on the news. They don't search for any type of education to dispel anything that they're seeing on the TV. So that's why it's so important that you talk to them, help people understand that everything that you're seeing on the media isn't necessarily true.
Because the elderly in particular were raised in a different era of information, right? I mean, when you only had the radio, you had like 4 channels. It's very different. Not that you necessarily should have believed everything.
They could lie
then.
way better then.
They could lie way better then, but also there was very few outlets to challenge it. And now we have a lot of ways to challenge information. In fact, it can happen so rapidly, it's often hard to keep up with. And I think that's where people who are not as engaged, either because of their age or because of their lifestyle, sort of get lost. They can only get the headlines, and that's not enough.
I've talked about my my show idea a couple times here, which is more like a half-assed show idea because it's like never going to get made. But the idea being that in the future, I'll give you the very quick version. The planet basically is post-apocalyptic. There's one city left. It's the last city. It's relatively big. And no one has any idea what happened to humanity or how civilization collapsed. Long story short, it turns out all of humanity still exists. They just are in underground bunkers in the metaverse, plugged their brains into the Neuralink. And the reason why the last city doesn't know this is because they consume information in a dramatically different way. The idea for that is basically because it's happening now. Older people don't know how to use. I'm not saying they absolutely don't. I'm saying most old people don't use Twitter, don't use TikTok or Instagram, and get their information only from the authority figures on TV. So they are living in bubble world. And when you go to them and you're like, hey, here's a thing that's true, what you're believing is fake, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, let me show you the tweet. I don't know what that is. You may as well be going to someone and being like, you don't know what's going on with Joe Biden because you're not in the metaverse plugged into the Neuralink and getting the information down. Oh, there it is. New information proving his corruption. And then they're like, what information? Yeah, he took $200,000. How do you know that? It was wired right to my brain. If you were plugged in, you'd know it too. I don't know how to plug into that stuff. I'm going to turn on CNN. CNN doesn't talk about it. That's basically the gist of the story I was making up is basically see that what we're seeing now with how people consume information. You can go to your friends and family, and there's a reason why your older relatives and family holidays don't know these things and don't believe you because they're not plugged in the same way all of you are. I mean, if you're watching this show, you are plugged in.
Yeah, you're engaged in a different way. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we'll see happen with definitely millennials, probably Gen Z, is that they are, I mean, I know more and more people, and I wish I had the data with me on me to prove this, but one of the biggest changes culturally is that people don't have cable anymore. There are tons of families that just don't have it. You know, college students who are getting their first apartments or young adults, whatever, they don't get cable because they only need Wi-Fi because they stream everything anyways. There is a complete disconnection from an entity that used to have access to people. Maybe that's good. On the other hand, they are reliant on a very decentralized way of getting information, and that could also be bad. I mean, this is why.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's centralized too. That it's on TikTok. It's on the same platform. It's no longer the internet anymore. Like our millennial generation grew up with the internet and going to different sites and stuff. Now it's on platforms, and these platforms have organizations behind these pages.
Yeah.
So it's another centralization of a news source, which then unfortunately leaves it really vulnerable to this sort of like top-down control media narrative saying like it's going to be one way or the other, and this is the only way to hear the story. So
big agendas.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.